Welcome to another Lombardi Live. We have a great drummer here who is also a great educator, and I can't wait to get into some conversations with him. Not very many drummers are known by their initials, and now I'm going to give it away before I introduce him, but his initials are JP. We'll find out where that came from. I assume he just didn't go through the alphabet and come up with like XZ or TW. These are like really cool initials because he's a really cool guy. JP Bouvet, thank you for joining me today.
An absolute pleasure, Don. Thanks for having me.
It's been a lot of fun. I first became aware of you, as a lot of drummers did, I think, back in, what year was it? The
Probably 2012.
2012?
Mm-hmm.
The Guitar Center Drum-Off.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a mind blow. I was there that year, by the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Sure. And there was, right after that, I'm seeing you had won the Roland V-Drum contest.
That was right before it, yeah.
Right before, but they were like two in a row.
Yeah.
I thought of having a drum channel contest, but then I thought, why have a contest if the guy's going to win it?
Yeah, the LA date was funny because the Guitar Center Drum-Off finals and the Roland International finals were a week apart, both in LA. So for months I was preparing for both of these terrifying performances at the same time. I had a Neil Peart situation going on, acoustic drum set here where I'd practice the Guitar Center, and then when it got too late for my neighbors back in Minnesota, I would flip around and play the electronic kit. It was pretty fun.
That's not the only thing that was different. There was a little different hairstyle going on those days too, right?
I've come through my own hair eras, yes, over the years.
and I remember it was like not even close that year because you just blew everybody's mind because of what you did musically. Because it was like you were hearing a band play as opposed to a chops fest, if you will. What do you think prepared you the most? Drummers who are out there entering, we have drum channel contests regularly, but what do you think prepared you the most? And what do you think gave you the edge to be, that step above what people were looking for?
Yeah, as mundane as it sounds, I think the biggest thing was preparation. So there's 5 rounds in the Guitar Center Drum-Off. And there's 3 in the Roland Drum-Off, and the international competition was the 4th round of that, if you want to think of it that way. So these things went on for 5 months.
By rounds, you mean there was you kept kind of whittling down to the top.
Right. It starts with local, store finals, district finals, regional finals, national finals. But really, what it was is I was obsessing over this solo for about 4 or 5 months straight, to the degree that I wasn't sure if I was going to continue at Berklee anyways, and I took this as a cue to drop out and just practice for these contests.
I didn't know that was the timing. So that you were at Berklee, and that's after the contest.
Yeah, I was in my 5th semester, and the thought was in my mind, I don't know what to study next, essentially, because I was in a major where you mix and match your own classes. And I was looking at the next semester, and I was like, I'm not super excited about a lot of this stuff. So, question mark. And then I was doing the Drum-Off and had gotten to the finals and had done the Drum-Off 5 or 6 times before in my life in different years. And so I was like, oh wow, I'm like really getting far in this thing. I'm gonna give it all I got. And I essentially withdrew from school 2 weeks before the end of the semester officially and moved home to Minnesota where my parents lived at the time and practiced literally just morning till night and was just fine-tuning this solo. And it's interesting because, to keep answering your question, 1, I prepared so much. And when I got to California for the finals, I was a little surprised because you meet with the other contestants, you kind of hang out for a few days. And some of the guys were talking like, yeah, I might do like this kind of thing. They were like still figuring out what they were going to do in the solos. And I was like, oh, I've like almost note for note what I'm going to do for a month straight now and have been just drilling it. All that, so there's that, and then there was, I think you're onto something. I can't know what was the tipping point, but there was a compositional element that I think was important. And I took that was the first year they introduced the Roland Octopad, which was a little controversial because it introduced a non-drumming element. Like you said, you had an opportunity to kind of write a song. And that's immediately where my mind went when I knew that was a part of the setup, is that this is going to have to be a composition where there is really cool drumming going on. But the music, I wasn't thinking this at the time, but in retrospect, I think a powerful musical piece is just inherently more likely to be impactful than a powerful drum solo. You just got more tools at your disposal. And like, harmony is really powerful. And that evokes a lot more emotion than you can on the drum set. So I think the compositional element was a big part of it. And the only funny, sort of bittersweet part of my preparation is that I actually have always struggled with the final performance, because I had prepared without reading the fine print. I had done this thing where I had like cowbell on my right hand, cowbell on the left foot, and I'd worked out singles, doubles, and speaking of Thomas Lang here, where it just jammed, singles, doubles, and paradiddles between those two limbs, and this groove over top, and it sounded so cool. And I got to LA, and I was backstage before the contest began, and I was like, sweet, and they were like, you can, and I was like, it's cool if I, and they're like, you can only use one percussion element. I was like, oh man, like a third of my solo is based on this. I've been practicing these freaking rudiments between these limbs for, hours and hours and hours. So there's this part in the solo where I'm sort of fumbling with like cross sticks and trying to make it work. And I can't watch it because I know what it's supposed to be. But all the same, that was definitely the catalyst. That was the beginning of my career. A lot of eyes turned toward me. And everything started there. The next question was trying to make something of it, but there it was.
Let's go down memory lane for just a moment here.
I love it.
Let's take a look at that solo that he did in the contest in the Guitar Center Drum Off 2012. Check out the hairdo too. We'll be right back. All right, that was fantastic.
Well, thank you. The thing, there's another funny, bittersweet thing. The thing that people got to check out, there was sort of a weird thing, the International Roland V-Drums contest. I was really proud of that at the time. I thought I freaking nailed it. I didn't win the contest, but I thought I nailed it. The international finals. And the drum off, I won, but felt really kind of conflicted about the solo. No one saw the one I really loved and I thought was really special. Everyone saw the one that I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. So check out the Roland. It's the International V-Drums contest. I had a bunch of my Berklee friends make, because they said you could use the sample pad, which means you can load any sound in it, which means I'm surrounded by musicians at Berklee. I have an insane unfair advantage. I had like one friend of mine write like heavy guitar, double bass stuff. I had another friend sing like a song that I was playing guitar on the electronic drums underneath, just supporting with chords. It honestly was one of the cooler things that I've done compositionally, but no one's seen it. But it's cool. It's worth checking out. It's still a little cringy because I feel like I'm looking at a kid version of myself. I have the mohawk, and you know how it is.
You piqued my interest. We've got to.
You got to do it.
Let's check it out. We'll be right back again.
Bridge the gap between your world and mine. Run along the moonlit sky and bridge the gap between your world and mine.
So it just brings up the subject, creativity, vocabulary, and what you did, even though you're saying you prepared yourself for it, you've taken that to another level where you're going to be improvising on the courses that we have that you've been doing here on Drum Channel. Explain a little bit about your theory and how you've grown maybe over the last 12, 15 years actually.
Yeah, well, improvisation has always been sort of the point of drumming for me. The contests are a weird thing because the judges don't know if you're making it up or not. They can't know. So if you want to win the contest, you're best off preparing some incredible thing and just leaving it up to them to think, I don't know, maybe he was making it up as he went. So there was space in the solos where I would, the fill isn't actually note for note planned, but the structure of it was planned and the basic grooves were planned. So those were thoroughly planned. And basically what happened is from that moment forward, and I had always been into improvisation from the beginning, but the contest happened, and then I got this really weird tour where I was playing for like an easy listening piano artist in the Midwest, and it was just like it was like my first tour that paid any money, and we were on a bus and driving around playing random theaters.
You could make a living doing this.
I could do it, and it was fun because they'd give me a drum solo every night for like 3 to 5 minutes. And what happened during that is, so every night we would do like 40 shows, 39 shows in 40 days. And so I'm playing a drum solo every night. It wasn't a strenuous show, so that actually wasn't hard to do, the every night thing. And I would make a plan. And I met a great friend on that tour, Josh Fink on bass. And eventually you just run out of ideas. And I was like, Josh, give me some prompts. And he'd be like, rattlesnakes. And so I'd be, I'd start my solo and I was like, the first section is rattlesnakes, and I'd have a brush and I'd go. Right, and like try to like channel that idea somehow on the kit, and he'd be like balloons or war or something. And that was fun, but basically as this tour went on, I started getting tired of even planning. Like it started to just feel formulaic. It was like if I planned the solo, I was sort of I had a limited number of like planned ideas. So it started becoming this thing where I was like, even planning solos started to feel sort of unfun. And then at the same time, I was getting into like, I don't know, sort of a little bit of my spiritual journey was turning a certain way, and it was like mindfulness, and it was like a lot of allowing things to happen and being in the moment. And I was like, clearly the magic, when I experience the magic of music, it is when it just happens to me and things are carried away, right? And improvisation is sort of your window into that. And since roughly that period, that's always been the point. To me, the payoff of thousands, tens of thousands of hours of practice is to be able to sit down at the drums and kind of just open the faucet and let stuff happen and like the sound. And it doesn't mean that I need to play the craziest things. It's just like, is it rewarding to do? There's something intrinsically valuable and fun about just being able to improvise, and it doesn't have to be at this crazy high level. So it's been the thing I care about most on the drums for a long time. And in my teaching, it was more like recently in the last 4 years or so where some things clicked, just like thinking about how I thought about the drums. And I had students come and they wanted to learn to improvise. And together, these sort of ideas started emerging between us that were really useful and were helping me understand what the path toward improv is for someone who can't currently do it. And for me, it had been an organic process. But I was now starting to see, if we think about it this way, if we walk it through this process, if this is the focal point, then I'm seeing my students start to flow effortlessly on the drums after not that long. Like, now I'm not talking like decades of practice. I'm saying like 6 months into lessons, the student has never improvised a note in their life. They've only played transcriptions. And 6 months in, they're telling me that they can kind of just like think in melodies, and they can just like come out, and it feels so cool and different. So anyways, that's where things started to bloom for me educationally on this topic. And it all started to feel really good because that's where my heart is at as a player and as a musician. So I'll stop there because I don't want to drone on forever. But that's sort of the birth of where my current educational philosophy started happening.
So how do you broaden that spectrum? Because a lot of people think jazz is an improvisational form, but rock isn't, which of course is not true. But in terms of improvising, if I were to Google improvise and see your definition of it, how would you explain that to young drummers out there?
That's really something I should have ready on the cuff here, but defining improvisation, let's limit ourselves just to the drums. Let's work it out, and then it'll get nice and short by the end of this. But basically, it's moving between different options easily enough that you don't feel like you're choosing options anymore. So I think that's one good definition, and it actually encapsulates some of the process that happens, because one way of developing some freedom on the drums is to have a couple patterns that you learn to rearrange on the fly. And it gets to a point where it doesn't require any thought or energy to keep rearranging them, because the patterns are so habitual at that point. So then you start thinking about melodies, the melodies that they create, and then there's sort of a reverse thing where you can think of the melody and the patterns will fill themselves in. So you're rearranging things on the fly until, like, to the point where it's so easy that it doesn't feel like you're choosing between them anymore. And then if we want to sort of like add a second layer to the definition, I would say improvising on the drums is thinking of melodies and delivering them to the drums in a variety of ways.
Would you think drummers have to improvise more than other musicians, and that you're not in a situation usually where they're giving you every note that you're supposed to be playing?
Yeah, that almost never happens.
So even in a band situation, even if you're just playing a basic 2/4 rock groove, you're improvising that because you think that's what's supposed to be happening for that moment.
Right. I don't know if more or less. I definitely see your point that, like, I almost never receive charts, and when I do, they don't have exact drum notation. So in a sense, I'm always creating the part. I think this highlights a beautiful point in that there's really not much of a distinction. In my mind, there's really no distinction between improvising and composing. And composing just sounds fancy, and you might think I'm not a composer or whatever, but you are a creator on the drums. So when you are in your band and somebody brings a drum part in, and they're like, hey, let's find a groove that works for this. How do you find the groove? Well, you start messing around. You start improvising and exploring the options you have, and then you find a groove that works and you lock it in. So the process of composing a groove for most people is the process of improvising your way to something and then stop improvising, right? Because you've found the thing that you're meant to play. So a lot of times people think, like, improvising, I don't play drum solos, so I don't need to learn that. But the way that I teach improv, at least, is really just control over delivering melodies to the drum set in a variety of ways. This is just the stuff of drumming. It doesn't matter if you never play a drum solo in your life. I play very few drum solos nowadays. But when I go play with a group, maybe my own group, Childish Japes, maybe a jazz group in the city, I'm just playing the drums. And everything I do on the drums has been found through practicing improvisation, which is just getting to know melodies and different ways to deliver them to the drum set. So in my mind, sort of isolating improvisation as a subject is a little bit of an illusion, because when I'm teaching my students to improvise, for example, I'm teaching them to improvise, let's say, improvise kick melodies underneath a groove. And I'm going chicka-pa-boom, ka-boom, boom, ka.
Remove the water bottle. You're captured behind your drum set, by the way, folks, because we were running late on time on filming a great course that he did, and we got right on top of Lombardi Live is next, so we grabbed a chair here, and here we are. But play that a little bit, since I've got you behind the drums. That's something we don't usually have on Lombardi Live.
Yeah, and the benefit is we can demonstrate all these concepts. So I'm improvising with just my kick drum. And again, this fits the definition we just said. I'm thinking of melodies and I'm delivering them to the kit in a variety of ways. I'm thinking of melodies and I'm delivering them to my kick drum. And that's the only improv that's happening, but it's real improv. Right, so if I'm working with a student on developing kick drum freedom, right, we're simultaneously working on improvisation. Sure, you can explore different options. We're also just working on your awareness of the count and where you are in the bar and where you're placing notes and what those melodies feel like and sound like and the notation. All of the technical stuff of drumming is happening at the same time that you happen to be developing the ability to also just choose those things in the moment and change them. So learning, at least the way I think about it in my own teaching, is learning to improvise is really just learning the drums. And there's always an encouragement to experiment melodically with whatever the thing is you're working on, you know?
So would you say there's a difference? I know a lot of young drummers, and you've talked about it in your course and with Thomas. I saw the live stream you did with him recently also. An ostinato compared to coordination. So what you were playing there, would I be right in thinking you were kind of playing more of an ostinato between your hi-hat and your snare drum, and you were improvising with the bass drum, as opposed to a three-way independence exercise that you were practicing?
Absolutely. I think that's a really important and clear distinction. In this case, yeah, essentially we have independence and ostinato happening, and the melody is being delivered to the kick. If I am going to flow on the kit and use all my limbs together, the important thing is that I'll play the same melodies. I need the same melodies. I always need the same melodies in drumming, because they're in one bar of 16th notes in 4/4. There are really only so many accent melodies you're going to need, and they're made up of the same chunks of information: threes, upbeats, downbeats, whatever it might be. There's let's say a couple dozen, and those chunks give you sort of all the options so you can think about them. So I can use those same melodies, deliver them to the kick drum, or deliver them in a flow on the kit. But the important thing is, and this is one of the light bulb moments that I had in my teaching of improv, is that the thing that most of my students were missing was the ability to think of interesting melodies in the first place. So I would have students who had great technique, could play plenty fast, who could learn transcriptions and play them great. Independence was even cool. But every time they played anything, they were playing the same melodies. So it felt like they were playing the same thing all the time. And their creativity, their variety in their playing had to come exclusively from thinking of creative new arrangements on the kit, which is a lot harder. So when I started teaching students to think of melodies in the raw, in their minds before they even delivered to the kit, that's where everything started really blooming, because those same melodies they could bring to the kick drum, like I was just demonstrating, doom doom ka boom 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 to boom ba to boom boom, or to fills on the tom. Right, really similar melodies, played in different ways. And I call this rhythmic vocabulary, your rhythmic vocabulary. And there's a really interesting way that, this is where I sort of discovered it. I had a student in front of me, and this is really common. And he was I was like, play me an interesting kick drum melody. And he was kind of stuck, kind of playing the same couple of kick drum melodies. And I'd like, make an interesting one now. And I'd be like, give me another one. And he'd be like, I'm kind of out of ideas. And then I'd go, here's an interesting one, play this one. And by interesting, all I mean is uncommon. So I gave him an uncommon one. He can play it easily, but he can't think of it. And this is an illusion that is really dangerous, because a lot of people, they hear complicated rhythms. They kind of like, they don't like make them trip and throw off. They can dance to them. They're like, I get what's happening. Therefore, I get the rhythm. But if you can't think of it from nothing, then it's not actually available in your playing. So there's this difference between what I call your speaking vocabulary and your listening vocabulary on the drums. Whereas like a lot of people get rhythm when it's coming in. They might even get how it works on paper. They get the counting. But as obvious as it sounds, if you can't think of it in the moment, it's not a part of your playing. So we started working on getting their speaking vocabulary going.
This is a strange question. How do you learn how to think about it?
Yes. So it's building familiarity with the melodies. There's two things. Building familiarity with them so that they are sort of stuck in your head. They're melodies that you're very familiar with. And the other thing is identifying chunks of melody that are everywhere, that are easy to recall, and you master those. So, for example, if I play one measure or sing one measure of a melody, So if I need to remember the actual placement of each of those notes, I'm never going to remember it. And that's not how it's going to feel when I improvise at the end. I'm not going to be choosing random notes out of the measure to accent. What that measure is groups of 3 that start on the E, boom, 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 ba, 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 and then 3 upbeats at the end. So groups of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, ba, 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 and then these 3 upbeats at the end. So groups of 3, they're everywhere in music. This is one of the chunks of melody that you need to master so that it's just there in your head. So we're not thinking necessarily about like this count here and this one here. We're thinking of like this thing is everywhere. So you learn the groups of 3, right? Repeating on the kick drum, let's say, is a good place to learn them first. Starting on 1. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, And you do a bunch of sort of versions of that where, you can imagine sort of 5 or 6 exercises where by the end of it, that melody is pretty familiar and available. And then you practice with it and you use it a lot, you overuse it. And this is why I tell students to switch into creative practice mode and overuse whatever you were just working on. So now I'm improvising in that setting, so I'm playing a groove. And I'm going to overuse 3s. And what that looks like is me deciding when I start and stop the 3s. So I'm playing, and I've got some basic bar awareness. I'm like, what does this sound like if I start it on the and of 3? Okay. What about the E of 3? Right, and eventually you get comfortable enough where you feel like you can just flip the switch on-off with the 3s. Right, so I'm using 3s. I'm mastering this chunk of vocab that is essential and it's everywhere. Then you can do the same thing with like downbeats. People, that's really intuitive, but upbeats. Right? To-gong, boom, boom. To-gong, boom, boom. Boom, boom. Right. So you can imagine some exercises that do that too, and then you can imagine just do 3 or 4 or 5 more of this type of thing, and suddenly you can turn on and off 3s. You can turn on and off upbeats. You can turn on and off a couple other patterns. And then it starts to feel like you're improvising. And you are. Even though you're recalling certain patterns and you're sort of rearranging them on the fly, the fact that you're recalling something that you know doesn't mean that you're not improvising. I'm making up what I'm saying right now, even though I'm using all words that I've used a million times. So that's an important point. It's like you're not playing something new necessarily when you improvise. You might be, but it's not really the point, and it's not really the experience of doing it.
And you don't have to imagine it, as a matter of fact, because what you just talked about is a lot of what you have in your first course. The ups and downs, and maybe show us a small example of that. Also, what you're talking about here a lot, and you actually did it a lot in your course, was singing. So 2 questions. One, maybe show us a little bit of the ups and downs, because it was so simple, but it sounded so musical. And this would just be a little taste for you, because there's 7 exercises. I think we have 20 all together in the first course. And the importance, I'll just ask you first, the importance of a drummer being able to hear what he's playing. By that I mean singing it. Sing it and then learn how to, in the learning process, would you sing something and then try and reproduce what you sang?
Yes, yeah. And there's this cool reciprocal process with the singing and the listening, where if you've ever done something really that's challenging on the drums for you, it takes all of your concentration, takes all of your CPU, it's maxed out. There's none left for hearing what you're doing. So when you're practicing, one of the goals with every step is to get to a point where that step is easy enough that you can actually put your attention on just listening to what is happening and hearing the melodies that you're making. And those are, every time you're tuning your ears in to what's happening. They are it's feeding your intuition musically, right? So when we talk about like, if you can't think of the melody, you can't play the melody. Well, one way that melodies get in your bones is by listening to them while you're playing them, like really listening and letting them come in, that they're seeping in. It's a subconscious thing, so you can't like measure it, progressing, but that's happening. And then the sort of outward version of that is what you're describing, where it's like, these melodies are I'm familiar with them, I can sing them, and therefore I know what this is going to sound like before I even play it. And I guess I haven't thought about this, I don't know if ever, but like, if you're playing stuff that you couldn't sing, what does that mean for your drumming? Like, are you sort of shooting in the Wild West? Are you sort of guessing at that point? Or is there a space where you're playing stuff you can't sing and that's okay? I don't know, a question for people to think about. But
some things come possibly automatic. I mean, some things may be so instilled in you that it just happens without you thinking about it.
True.
Patterns that you've done over and over again, they just come out if you're not hearing something, you're going to do something.
Right.
So you're gonna go back to something that's maybe more rote or something that there's nothing wrong with having, your bucket of fish or your Pat Boone, Debbie Boone, in case,
totally.
In case at the end of the day you can't think of something else.
Yeah, everyone's got them. Yeah, of course. But let me get to your other half of the question. One of the most effective tools I've found for teaching improv is the down-up method. That's what I call it. And it is a lot of times for students their first experience with creating an unfolding melody, which is what you need in improv, that they have control over, which is what most people don't feel when they're improvising. The down-up method in its sort of simplest form is we don't even need to drum. We can go, it's moving from the downbeat track to the upbeat track. So they're always happening along, if we're in 16th notes, 1 E into 2 E into 3 E into 4, down, 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 or down, up, 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 down. And what we're doing when we do the down-up method, we're jumping from one track to the other. We're going down, 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 up, 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 down, down, up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down. But ideally, you're just doing this without playing anything. So down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down, down, up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up. Right? So if I can deliver that to a tom, then I'm really improvising. The constraints of the game are super tight, but I am improvising a melody and I have a lot of control over it and I know where one is and the stage is set. Because from there, you can build all sorts of variation on top of that. One of the, and this is actually, it's funny because I thought of this as just like I described, like an entry point into first improv. It continues to prove itself to be sort of ubiquitous, like universally useful. So kind of almost all types of vocab that I'll be doing, the down-up method appears in my mind as a useful guide. So one example, and the one that we talk about in the drum channel course, is the right, left, left kick subset. So it's this vocab that's based on the right, left, left kick pattern. And essentially, you've got a group of 4, right, left, left kick. And if you have a group of 2, that allows you to flip to the upbeat. Right, left, left kick, right, left, left kick, right, left, right, left, left kick, right, left. So I'm playing that 4 on the upbeat now. So I can down up method. Down, down, up, 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 down, 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 up, up. And essentially in the course, we build the ability to rearrange those 4s and 2s on the fly, aka play an unfolding melody according to the down-up method. And then of course we add all sorts of sticking variations, orchestration variations, replacement patterns. And if you can do, the first big milestone is the rearranging of the 4s and 2s, which you can. I've seen so many students get there at all levels. From there, you can build literally for the rest of your life variations and different patterns, right? So it ends up sounding like, and know that in my mind, I'm thinking down, down, up, 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 down. That's all I'm really thinking. And then I'm plugging in some variations. 3, 4. Right, so I'm making that up as I go. I'm thinking down ups. And if I may, this brings up something I think is just so cool, the 2 layers of improvisation that can happen simultaneously. The melody is changing and I'm following the down up method to have it unfold continuously. But at the same time, the treatment of the melody. So how is it being orchestrated? What are the ghost notes? What is the 4 pattern? Is it right, left, left, kick, or right, left, kick, kick, or something else? And you've got these 2 things. You can improvise just with one of them. So when I'm playing on the kick drum and I'm improvising kick drum notes underneath a groove, I'm not changing the orchestration. I'm just improvising at the melodic level. But if I bring that to the toms and I can make other decisions, now I introduce something else, but I could negate the melody. I could lock in a melody. So I'm not improvising with a melody. I'm improvising with my treatment of the melody. But then the real sort of goal that we're working toward is to be able to do both of those at the same time, because then the variety that's possible just explodes. I can create a melody on the fly that's unfolding and changing while I'm treating it along the way. And then, of course, like immediately, the possibilities are sort of endless.
And this is going by really fast as I'm hearing you say it, because we broke that down into over 20 lessons, I think, between the 2 courses. So there is a step-by-step process where you show what a downstroke is and what an upstroke is. Being able to show it to somebody, and it's another thing being able to explain what you're showing somebody. And you do that very well.
Thank you.
So where did you find that passion for teaching and your teaching experiences now? You have your own website, you do private instruction also?
Yeah. I've always had a drive to share, probably overshare. So, for example, this was very fortuitous timing, but I started a video blog before I left for California for the drum off. And it was like, I don't know what happens between being a nobody and being a somebody. I see somebodies. Dave Weckle's my hero at the time. And I was like, and I'm me in my basement, and I'm clearly a nobody. And it was very mysterious to me what happens between those 2 points. So I was like, I'm going to document the process in the off chance that I become a somebody so that it becomes a little clearer to other people, right? So there's this impetus to share that I don't know why I have, but I always have had. And so I started blogging, and it happened to happen with the biggest event probably in my life as far as my leg up in my career. And I kept doing those blogs. And I just liked sharing. And when I think a lot of people have this, like when you figure something out cool, you just want to tell somebody. You're like, check this out. This is cool. Please share your excitement with me. So I always had the urge to share. And that was part of the blogging from the beginning, from a very genuine and authentic place, which was fun. This was sort of before social media was at an early place where like, I don't even know what planted that idea. I didn't follow a single video blog. It wasn't really as much of a thing. I don't know why I decided to do that. But from there, a year after the drum off, I launched my educational website. And that again was just a combination of, I want to share stuff that I think is cool, and I'm trying to make something of the attention that I received from the drum off. So that first year was really about, okay, a million eyes are going to watch my solo. 0.1% of those are going to become fans if there's something to follow, something valuable. So I was trying to offer some value, and I launched the website, and that was one of my first sort of financial projects. I remember my first subscriber, I was like, I can't believe someone signed up for this. This is awesome. So fast forward 11 years later now, and jpbouvetmethod.com is really a huge part of my life, and I'm more passionate about it than ever. And to be transparent, there were a few years where I was kind of just phoning it in on the site. I do a lesson a week, and they're not very well planned, and there's no overlays, and there's one camera. I was pretty lazy about it, but it was because I felt this conflict between myself as a drummer, musician, and a drummer educator. And I wanted those to be balanced, and they weren't. And I almost was like dragging my educational potential down because I wanted to get my music stuff going, which is just a completely different game. One that I'm still working on, but it's going okay. But anyways, Fast forward, I don't know, 4 years ago, that's where my passion for teaching was sort of reignited in a way that it never had been, because I started getting a lot more, I don't know if this is the term, but sort of philosophical clarity about what I was trying to do. It started to become actually intellectually exciting to think about the teaching. And there were just a few light bulb moments, like rhythmic vocabulary, like I just described the melody as my students' biggest problem, as almost all of my students' biggest problem, was a light bulb moment that just struck me all of a sudden. And then this connection to a couple other like areas of teaching I had. I remember seeing my notebook and being like, writing them out and be like, that's how they're connected, right? So it became like, a little bit more interesting to me in that way. And that has really just snowballed and continued to snowball. And the more that has snowballed and the more of those moments I've had, and a lot of them are thanks to my students, because, it's in trying to solve the problems in real life that we have the ideas that matter. It's in that this has continued to snowball. And as that snowballed, I have just been seeing results with students. I mean, there's no question about whether or not I can teach you to improvise. Like, I have so many methods for doing it, and in triplets and in straight time and whatever you want to do, I can get you freedom on the drum set. And I feel really confident saying that now. And I wasn't confident saying that maybe even 3 years ago. So there's been this really sort of beautiful upward spiral of my passion for it and my curiosity in it, and sort of the results that are happening with students that do it.
I think
And
drummers
then-
are a sharing community, more probably than others, too.
Yeah. And I think the last idea here is that the one of the crucial insights for me, teaching-wise, improv-wise, was that the starting place has to be my internal experience of improvising. So this is where there's a little bit of overlap or influence from my mindfulness and meditation stuff that I've done in my own life, which is about observing your thoughts and sort of taking note of the experience internally that you're having. All of my teaching comes from this as the starting place. So as an advanced improviser, let's say, I'm playing and I can sit and notice what thoughts I'm having as I play. What types of thoughts am I having, for example? A very basic example is I'm not thinking of notation. I'm not picturing notation. I need to understand notation, but I'm thinking of melodies, or I'm thinking of a specific pattern and I'm moving it around. So this is where I reverse engineer that stuff down to the beginner level and say, how do I create a through line from the beginning so that people aren't wasting their time and that what they're doing is maximally relevant to the final experience of improvising. So that it's not that you do enough technical exercises that suddenly one day you can improvise. Improvising is a different internal experience from playing exercises. So you have to practice the improvising at basic levels that get more advanced, where you have more complexity to deal with as they go. And then eventually you arrive at this place that I think is really similar to what it feels like for any drummer to improvise if they sort of watch the show in their mind as it's going on. I think, and this is what I'm not certain about, I think that the experience internally is really similar between drummers. Not the same. Like, I think I just jammed with Thomas Lang. His drumming is different than mine, and I think his internal experience is probably different, but I think there's a lot of overlap as far as the types of flashcards of ideas that come and go in the flow of improv. Anyways, that was another major insight that got me really excited about the teaching, because that's where it started to be really effective.
You have a great website with a lot of lessons on it. So nice of you to give us a whole couple of courses, workshops here on Drum Channel that we can share here too. And you can't get enough of it out there. I think there's no competition when it comes into the drumming community. Drum Channel, we have a lot of great lessons on there from some of the best drummers in the world, including you now, which I certainly thank you again for. But you should be checking out your website too. How can they get a hold of you? And it's a subscription website also?
Yep, subscription, and it's a bunch of my courses, and they all focus on teaching improvisation and creativity. So it's quite a niche. That's why it's like you said, it's like we're doing very different things, and everyone's doing their authentic thing. And I have nothing on my website like what Drum Channel offers. So yeah, it's a great lack of overlap between those, and it's jpbouvetmethod.com. And yeah, it's a subscription site, and you get access to all the courses.
Private instruction. Huge advocate of private instruction. Can people get a hold of you to take private lessons also?
Yep, I teach on Sundays and do like feedback videos and stuff for my subscriber students. So yeah, I try to make it. I'm also a huge advocate of in-person feedback and interaction. I try to make that happen on the site as much as possible.
We talked about the whole idea of improvisation, which is the first workshop we did. And that was learning how to improvise within the drum set as a drummer.
Yeah.
Taking that to the next level. Talk a little bit about the second course.
Yeah, the second course is, what do we call it? Jamming and composing better drum parts. So this is in a musical context. So my friend Elisha Hennis McLosh, he's a keyboard player. The course is with him. So the whole point is, how do I become a more interesting jam partner? And that's the same question as how do I become a better composer of more interesting drum parts if I'm presented a song. Right? So the sort of quintessential example that the course sort of is based on is your guitar player brings in a riff, or you're sent a track to play drums on. Whatever it might be, you're encountering music and you play the first thing that comes to mind. Right? And a lot of times the first thing that comes to mind is not the most interesting thing. It might be perfect, but it also might not be perfect. And if you're searching for a creative part, the course walks you through a bunch of questions you can ask to try to find other options. Right? And so in finding other options, you might find the perfect groove for the song, sure, but you also might find how sections change. Right? So section A and section B a lot of times aren't completely unrelated. They just have maybe the same melody, same bass line, something else changes, and the drums can change along with them. So there's all these questions that we ask, and they lead to a lot of different ideas creatively. And they also reflect back into the practice room, where if you're asking this question, you're saying, what would it mean to make this groove busier? And you can't figure out how to make it busier. The next time you're in the practice room, that's the subject of practice that you have, and you know that it's immediately applicable because you actually needed it in real life. So the first course of that workshop deals with more technical questions, and the second course of that is more conceptual. It uses this tool that this visualization tool that I love to use called the web of intent. And long story short, it is a plethora of ideas to help you get away from the gray zone, which is that sort of area of boring, stagnant drumming.
And you'll learn more about the gray zone when you take your course.
There you go.
You'll know exactly what you're talking about. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really fun Lombardi Live, having you captured behind the drum set and learning a lot about not only what you're doing and your life experiences, but what you have to offer all of us out here in the drumming community. And I thank you for watching us tonight, too. We're going to see you next time on Lombardi Live, and we're going to see you again. Come out to California. Nice weather. Here we are.
Oh, it's nice. Oh, it's nice.
Thank you, JP.
Thanks so much, Don.
Yeah, I've got to ask you, because we said it at the end here. JP is for?
Jean-Pierre.
Yay, okay.
Jean-Pierre Didier Bouvet, the Frenchest name. It's a real crime that my French is so bad.
Hey, see you next time. Take care.
There you go.